Welcome everybody to our event today called The Power of Nutrition and Functional Medicine for Supporting HSPs with Anxiety and Depression with Anastasia Smith. Welcome, Anastasia. So happy to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you for the opportunity.
Yay!
Really happy to be here.
It's going to be an awesome subject. I want to read your bio so people get to know you a little bit. And I'm Julie Bjelland, for those of you new to knowing who I am. Anastasia is the founder of Whole Mind Health and is a registered nutritionist that specializes in nutrition and its role in mental health and neuroscience. She is passionate about empowering people with the tools to take their mental health into their own hands and has been working for the past 5 years with clients suffering from a wide range of psychiatric conditions. This is going to be such a great event. I'm excited to have it and talk to you about it. And I think that we were talking a little bit before. I want to ask you, how did you get involved in this field?
Well, I guess like many people who get involved in any kind of therapeutic modality, it often is because of their own health story, right? And whilst it wasn't a specifically diagnosed mental health condition that led me to this, I think, you know, throughout my life, I've always had a predisposition to being a very anxious person. And you know, knowing that, I've realized now that my nervous system has always been pretty sensitive, you know. Throughout my childhood, I was a very healthy child, and throughout my adolescence as well. But I had quite significant kind of hormonal imbalances, which, you know, led to kind of menstrual problems, but also acne. And I think, you know, doing my own research and having had to take, you know, rounds and rounds of antibiotics and the contraceptive pill to help with my acne, all of these sorts of different, you know, medication methods, I realized through my own research that actually there was another way. And that's when I started researching nutrition. I started researching lifestyle kind of strategies to help with, you know, stress. And I ended up initially training to be a yoga teacher because I was introduced to yoga at quite a young age to my mum, who is a very avid yoga practitioner to this day. And through, I guess, you know, practicing yoga and through my own yoga practice, I got kind of interested in nutrition and also Ayurvedic medicine as well, which I know that you did a recent podcast on. And then I suppose that way I just realized I wanted to help people. I wanted to help people understand what the root causes are of disease or, you know, imbalances in their health. And I felt that nutrition was really one of the most important pillars to that. Of course, there are there are other circumstances to our health. It's not just nutrition. There's also lifestyle. It's also the relationships that we have. It's also the experiences that we've had in our life. But I felt like nutrition was a good place to start. So I studied nutrition, and throughout this period, I was suffering with a lot of anxiety to the point where it actually led to a significant eating disorder, specifically bulimia, throughout my kind of younger, you know, 20s, more or less. Went through a lot of therapy, you know, looked into also nutritional aspects of what could be leading to, I suppose, the vulnerability to those urges, to that behavior. And that's when I realized that I wanted to focus kind of more on working with people with mental health conditions. And through my recovery, really kind of became more confident in that area. After studying nutrition, I started working for an organization based here in the UK called Food for the Brain, which is a not-for-profit organization that generates awareness about the importance of nutrition for mental health. And it's a really interesting organization. So I've been working for them for the past 5 years, as well as my private practice, you know, working one-to-one with clients. And so that's really where I am today. And I'm doing that. I'm dividing my time between working for Food for the Brain and then my private practice, which is a great kind of, it's a great ratio and it's a great dynamic. You know, I don't think I could just wear one hat. I like wearing many hats.
Yeah. Oh, you're one of my favorite kinds of people to talk to, because I found this over and over again with HSPs. When we're going through, I mean, we're most passionate about the things that we struggled with, and then we found some answers with and improved things through. And I love sharing that with the community, because now you're an expert in this particular area. And I think with HSPs, we see such a high prevalence of anxiety and depression in this population. And I also see a high prevalence of sensitivity in general to in digestion and nutrition. And I think that being able to target these specific things for our health can be really significant, especially for this population of sensitive people. So I'm excited about today. So what do you think? Where do you want to start? What's important to teach about today?
I was kind of thinking about this, you know, before we came online, and I guess there are some fundamental pillars when it comes to nutrition and mental health. And you might say that these pillars are, you know, transferable to other conditions as well. But when it comes to mental health, there are some specific things that I will always talk to with clients, and particularly new clients that are, you know, coming to me as lay people that don't really know much about nutrition, but are interested and are curious. And before kind of doing more deep investigative work into you know, using testing to see what could be going on, like nutrient deficiencies and things like that, there are some key fundamental pillars that we will definitely work on before we do that investigative work. And you kind of just mentioned one now with digestion, actually. So there is this really kind of emerging field of research around the brain-gut, or the gut-brain axis. And I don't know if you know much about that, but and I'm sure many people, you know, in your community do know a lot about it. But it's a really fascinating field of research right now. And what researchers and what scientists are seeing is that there is this key link between these two nervous systems. Of course, we have our central nervous system, which is our brain, and our spinal cord and our autonomic nervous system. But also our enteric nervous system, which is the nervous system that we have in our gut. And many people call this nervous system the second brain. Mm-hmm. And it's often, you know, where we're feeling, you know, that gut feeling, where, you know, something isn't right, or if something is right, it's where we'll feel it first. And when it comes to diet and nutrition, that is what can really have an impact on the makeup of our gut microbiome, which is, you know, the kind of ecosystem that lives in our gut, the bacteria, the protozoa, the yeast, all of the microbes that live in our gut that form this very complex ecosystem, and the role that they play in supporting our neurochemistry, which seems very strange because obviously they're not in our brain, they're in our gut. But what happens is that there is this bi-directional communication going on between our brain and our gut. And in particular, what we're seeing now in research is the research into specific strains of bacteria, in particular things like the lactobacilli family and the bifidobacterium family, which have been kind of heralded as the most important strains of bacteria, of kind of commensal bacteria, which are the bacteria that keep things in balance. And these two strains have been shown to be very important for things like neurotransmitter turnover and neurotransmitter expression, but also things like keeping our gut lining intact. Okay, so there is this talk a lot at the moment about leaky gut. And leaky gut is essentially what can happen when the intestinal wall becomes permeable. And this has been related a lot to neuroinflammation. Mm-hmm. And neuroinflammation is the hallmark of depression, is a hallmark of depression. So there's this very, very kind of significant body of research showing that inflammation is a key kind of driver of depression. So that's one aspect, you know, of these pillars for mental health, and where nutrition comes in is that the types of foods that we eat can have an impact on that ecosystem and how well in balance it is. So are we kind of stimulating the nourishment of the good guys over the bad guys, essentially? And I don't know whether you want to ask any specific questions about what foods we should be eating to nourish our gut bacteria. Perhaps it's something else that your community want to know, right?
Yeah, and definitely put your, yeah, Christy says, yes, please.
Yeah,
I want to say too, this is so important, the gut health. And I love the concept of prepping it and preparing it to be healthy ahead of time, because we know with HSPs, there's more activation in that fight flight part of our brain. So, yeah, which shuts down digestion when we're stressed. Yeah. So there's a lot of chronic issues in the gut, in the gastrointestinal system. So yes, we hear yes, yes, more yeses in the community for specific.
Yeah. Yes. So there are a few key things. And it very much depends on the individual as well, because what we see quite often nowadays is IBS, which is irritable bowel syndrome. So some people have issues like bloating and gas and abdominal cramping. So some of these kind of key foods might not work for an individual. So that's something to keep in mind. But one of the things that I would say is probably the most important is plant foods. So the variety of plant foods and the variety of colors that you have in your diet can influence the production of certain metabolites in your gut, which have been shown to help things like restore the intestinal wall, help things like neurotransmitter turnover and expression in the brain, and also mitigating inflammation if there is inflammation going on. So really eating a rainbow is the best thing that you can do. So really getting as much color into your plate as you can, or making sure you've got some plant foods in there, you know, hopefully breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Not so easy to do at breakfast with the type of diet that many of us eat, but that's a really good strategy, and it's very, very straightforward as well. Just try and get as much color in your plate as you can. So that will really ensure that we're getting all of these different types of fibers that our gut bacteria really thrive on to produce these metabolites that help with this bidirectional communication between the gut and the brain. So that's one thing. And then there are specific types of fibers that are great for this as well, and that's soluble fiber, which you'll find in things like squash, plantain, tubers, carrots, for example, as well, and also cooked and cooled potatoes, which sounds strange, but when you cook a potato and you cool it, it increases in resistant starch, which is a type of fiber that is essentially fuel for your gut bacteria. So all of these different types of fibers can really influence the makeup of our gut and can help keep at bay the strains that we don't want to be overrepresented in the gut. So typically those are the pathogenic strains of bacteria, which are disease causing. So all of these different types of fibers can help keep those guys at bay.
This is so that's one. I am such a huge potato fan, so I have to ask you a question. Now, are you saying that the benefit is not when the potato is warm, it's only when it's been cooled down?
So yeah, so when it cools down, that's when the resistant starch increases in the potato.
Okay, good to know.
So, I mean, of course, potatoes in themselves have some benefits. It's just that, when we're speaking specifically about this type of, fiber, that's one of the kind of methods is to, cook and cool down a potato so that you can get that resistant starch in there.
Yes. Oh, I love the eating the rainbow thing and hearing about some of the foods that you recommend. And there's actually a garden section in our community there's a lot of gardeners in our community. I think a lot of HSPs enjoy growing their own food. So this is going to be fun to hear about more.
Yeah, no, that's great. And actually contact, with soil is really important, because research shows that when you're in contact with healthy soil, that can actually influence our gut microbiome as well. So,
yes.
Another way that we can improve our gut.
I love that you're mentioning that. I bet a lot of people don't know that. I actually learned about that not that long ago, and I love being in the soil in gardening. So I've read some studies on it too, about it helping with depression. to work with healthy soil.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's amazing, actually. Just even like, eating soil by accident. Obviously, you don't want to eat soil, intentionally, but that has been shown to be quite positive for your gut microbiome. So when kids are playing around in the dirt, that's actually a really important thing for their immune system, because 70% of your immune system is in your gut. So, really kind of focusing on improving the ecosystem in your gut can also improve your immune system.
Is that amazing?
Yeah, it is amazing. It's really a fascinating area of research, and also mind-boggling as well. So, the area of nutrition science is always changing too. So you have to keep on top of it all.
And everything that you're mentioning are things that used to be a part of our daily life. Like we all used to have gardens. We all used to, be digging in the dirt, and we all used to be playing in the dirt. And all of these things have started to kind of change over time.
Yeah.
I think we need to go back to that.
Yes, absolutely. And that is what the research is pointing to, going back to those practices that we, would have had naturally in our everyday lives. Fermented foods is another one. We used to ferment foods to increase their shelf life and to essentially have a longer kind of duration of a food, will last for longer, and that fermentation process will actually stimulate the production of probiotic bacteria, which is good bacteria in the food source itself through the lactic acid. So normally it's lactic acid producing bacteria like the lactobacilli family of bacteria, and this kind of family of bacteria, there's so much research behind the lactobacilli in lots of many aspects of health promoting kind of factors. But fermenting foods is something that we used to have. Part of our intrinsic diet really is to have fermented foods like sauerkraut or pickled vegetables. What else? Things like miso and kombucha, like fermented tea, for example, is quite a trendy food nowadays. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to eat trendy foods. It's just, you can do that at home. It's really easy to ferment cabbage, for example, if you like it. It's easy to ferment. So eating fermented foods is another great strategy to kind of influence your gut microbiome positively.
Yes, I know a lot of people who make their own fermented vegetables and even cook kombucha.
Yeah, it's super trendy right now. So
kimchi, somebody said too.
Yes, kimchi is a great one. Kimchi is a great one. If you like spicy, it's a great one.
Wonderful. Oh, I love it. Keep going.
So I mean, that's the gut-brain axis, really. And there are other things like, for example, blood sugar levels. Someone's asking, eating fermented foods daily, is that necessary? I don't think you necessarily have to eat fermented foods on a daily basis to have a positive impact. It can maybe be a few times a week. But little amounts with your meals. It doesn't need to be a huge amount either. I think that just in itself will have a positive impact. And if you're sensitive and if you struggle with IBS, then just having a spoonful of the liquid rather than the actual vegetable itself can also be good as a kind of an introduction, because sometimes it can be cause bloating. No, it's not. Is my mic?
Oh, okay. I just was checking. I heard some clicking sound, but it's okay. We'll keep going.
If it gets worse, let me know. I mean, my mic's not moving. It's up here, so it's not on me.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So another key pillar of supporting brain health and mental well-being is regulating our blood sugar levels, which is also something that might seem very straightforward, but it really can have, and I feel actually it's probably one of the most important aspects of our diet to help prevent anxiety and things like panic attacks.
Yes, the blood sugar, I 100% agree with you, because it's especially important for sensitive people to keep that level, because that can impact our mood so much, our mood and energy levels. Yeah, especially anxiety and depression, if that's something that you are struggling with, huge area. I like that you're mentioning that.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, with blood sugar levels, there are two aspects of blood sugar levels that can really, you know, play a role in mental health. One of them is that the human brain is the most energy hungry organ in the body. It only weighs around 1.4 to 1.5 kilograms, but it actually requires or steals around 25% of the body's energy.
Isn't that amazing?
And that energy is mediated by your blood sugar levels. So your brain likes to have your blood sugar levels in, you know, tight parameters throughout the day. And when your blood sugar levels are roller coastering, it essentially gets an inconsistent supply of energy. And it needs that to, you know, to do all of the amazing things that the brain does, like neurotransmitter production, brain cell signaling, brain cell regeneration, memory, all of these things, all of these aspects of brain health. So if that's, you know, if you're eating foods that are high in quick releasing sugars that are going to send your blood sugar levels skyrocketing and then consequently crashing, that's going to lead to an inconsistent supply of energy. So brain fog, depression, low mood, irritability are some key, you know, symptoms of blood sugar imbalance.
Yes.
And then there's the other aspect of blood sugar, and that's that when your blood sugar levels are crashing too quickly, what happens then? Your basically your adrenal glands are stimulated to produce cortisol and noradrenaline, which are two major kind of stress hormones. It essentially sends the body into fight or flight. Because, you know, what our body thinks is that we need so just to backtrack, when your adrenal glands are producing cortisol and adrenaline, it's because essentially your body thinks it needs your quick energy to get away from something that is, you know, stressful or maybe even life-threatening. And what these hormones do is they actually pull glucose storage from your liver into your blood circulation to be used for energy. So that again, that can also add on to this blood sugar imbalance picture. So for someone who is sensitive, you know, that has a nervous system that is sensitive and that is prone to anxiety, that person is essentially already vulnerable to being in fight or flight too often. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, compounding on top of that with the blood sugar imbalance, that's just going to send you over the edge. So getting your blood sugar levels really balanced, really kind of, you know, within those tight parameters throughout the day is one of the most important things that you can do to help you manage, you know, the triggers that are in your environment, which are, you know, the circumstantial things that perhaps we may not be able to control sometimes, like, you know, relationships or traumas, you know, things like that, you know, that we need to be able to process. But when our blood sugar levels are going up and down throughout the day, we're going to be less, you know, able to process them with a rational mind, because that fight or flight just triggers our limbic system, you know, which is the primitive part of our central nervous system. And that shunts, you know, all of the energy away from the prefrontal cortex, which is the rational brain, essentially, and leads to poor decision making, you know, leads to problems like anxiety. So, yeah, so blood sugar really, I cannot stress it being, you know, probably the most important thing when it comes to managing anxiety and, you know, panic attacks and PTSD.
I love that you're mentioning all of this and how important this is for children and teens as well, to be thinking about if you've got children, grandchildren, whatever. This is so important for us to be keeping our brain health strong like this, and our brain is using 25% of our energy. That's crazy. Yeah. And I love learning the brain science behind it, because I feel like as HSPs, when we understand, it's like, oh, this is happening inside my body. Like you talked about the pulling glucose from the liver. It's like, oh, okay, yeah, that might not be a good thing. And this is activating my adrenal glands. I mean, we have a lot of problems with adrenal fatigue, overuse as HSPs. So knowing that's creating that release of those stress hormones. I mean, that's something right there. It's like, that's enough to know. We need to be really serious about this, keeping this stabilized. Do you have suggestions how people can do that?
Yeah, they do. So the most important thing is protein, actually. Making sure that you're getting a good source of protein in every single meal. And I normally give the guideline to my clients of a gram of protein per kilogram of weight. So
Say
if
that
you
again?
weigh
A gram of.
1 gram of protein per kilogram of weight.
Okay.
So, if you're 60 kilograms, you want to aim to get around 60 grams of protein in your diet throughout the day. And so, that means around, 20 grams of protein in each meal, for example. So I try to coach my clients into really kind of, when they're looking at their plate and they're looking at the ratio of the different macronutrients in their plate. The macronutrients basically means protein, carbohydrate, and fat. We want to be prioritizing protein and fat. And when we are choosing our carbohydrates, we want to choose the right types of carbohydrates. We want to choose the slow releasing carbohydrates. So if that means grains, we want to choose whole grains. So brown rice over white rice, for example, or brown bread over white bread. So that extra fiber in there is going to help slow down the release of sugar or energy from the food that you're eating. So your digestive system has to work harder to do that, basically. So other things like, root vegetables are good sources of complex carbohydrates or slow releasing carbohydrates. So when you're looking at the context of a plate, you want to aim for about 1/4 of your plate as protein. And then the other 1/4, a complex carbohydrate or a mixture of different complex carbohydrates. So it could be roasted beetroot, it could be some roasted sweet potato, for example, or some squash or some plantain. And then the other half of your plate, some vegetables, salads, thinking about that rainbow again, getting in the variety of vegetables. So if you stick to that guideline, you'll probably hit, the blood sugar balance, basically. It's going to provide your brain with that consistent fuel. So that's probably one of the main things I would say. And the other thing is caffeine. You have to be careful with caffeine because caffeine, I'm sure many of you already know, caffeine will stimulate the production of cortisol and adrenaline from your adrenal glands. It will send you into fight or flight. And so again, when we're thinking about sending a message of safety to our nervous system, caffeine is not really going to do that, especially when you're a HSP and you're predisposed to anxiety or you have PTSD. You want to send a message of safety to the body, and that's not anything that's going to trigger fight or flight. So you really want to keep those blood sugar levels nice and stable, and caffeine will really mess with your blood sugar levels. So I often recommend to people to, if they are drinking a lot of caffeine already in their diet, to halve that with decaf initially, because you don't want to completely, it's baby steps, isn't it? So
yeah, you can get pretty bad headaches if you just suddenly cut it out.
Yeah. Oh, it's horrendous. I remember a whole week of feeling like I was in a cloud and having headaches. It was horrendous. And that was even just from having 1 coffee a day.
Yes.
So,
I used to get the worst migraines, and this is many years ago, not understanding that a lot of it was, attributed to caffeine. So when I cut out caffeine, I couldn't believe my migraines went away.
wow.
But they definitely got worse for a while. Yeah, because
yes.
your body's actually having it's like trying to detox out of caffeine. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's amazing actually, isn't it? How just coffee, which, is so normal in our society to drink coffee, can have such a profound impact on the body's nervous system.
Yeah, especially sensitive people. And it's important to understand we're going to be different than 80 to 85% of the population around us. So this is one of the areas we are likely very different.
Yeah, definitely. Someone's asking, is tea okay? So one thing to keep in mind is that we are all different when it comes to metabolizing caffeine. So it very much depends on your resistance, your tolerance to caffeine. But if it's black tea, which means that it will have caffeine in it, or green tea, for example, black tea will be higher in caffeine. So you want to, have that in moderation. I would say no more than maybe 2 cups a day. But again, it really depends on the individual and how, what their symptoms are. So if they are anxious, then I would say just don't have it at all.
Yeah.
Green tea is different. Green tea has caffeine in it, but it also has something called L-theanine, which is a compound that can stimulate GABA in the brain. And GABA is one of the brain's most important inhibitory neurotransmitters that helps us feel really quite zen and really but focused at the same time. It's just, I don't know if you've felt that before with drinking green tea, but it helps you focus, but not in like a wired way.
Yeah, yeah. And for me, I can't have it later. Like I always have to have anything that has any caffeine in it has to be like before noon, or I will not sleep that night.
Yeah.
That's how impacted I am, even with green tea. So if I have anything like that, I always do it early in the day.
Yeah, and that's also a great strategy, because caffeine can stay in your system for up to 12 hours. So
Yeah.
if it does impact your sleep, then you want to make sure that the majority of that is out of your system by the evening.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. Great information. I love this. And any more questions, you can put them into the chat now. What else is important, do you think, Anastasia, about everyone is asking any specific advice for vegetarians? Great question. I know Becca is a vegan too.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So one of the other pillars is specific nutrients for brain health. And of course, all of the micronutrients, so that's vitamins and minerals, all of them play some role in our brain health and our, overall health. But there are some specific nutrients that have been, researched quite highly and have been shown to be very pivotal in our brain health and mental well-being. One of them is omega-3. And omega-3 is an essential fatty acid, which we need to get in our diet because we cannot manufacture it in our body. And omega-3 is readily found in oily fish and seafood. And I say readily because whilst it can be found in vegetarian sources like nuts and seeds, it's found in alpha-linoleic acid form, which is a fatty acid which when we ingest, when we eat, needs to be converted into omega-3 in our body through enzymatic pathways. And that conversion process is not so great. So we need to, if you're vegetarian or vegan, you need to make sure that you're getting a really good consistent supply of that alpha-linoleic acid in your diet. So that's things like flax seeds, chia seeds, hemp seeds, walnuts. I'm trying to think what else. Those probably are the main, I feel like I've missed one out. There's probably the main seeds that you want to be looking at as, I would say on an everyday basis. Omega-3 is such an important, such a critical nutrient for brain health for a variety of reasons. In particular, so omega-3 is made up by two components, EPA and DHA. And DHA is in particular important for the structural kind of part of our brain. It actually forms the structural component of the cell, the structural component of the cell membrane, the brain cell membrane. And so it's really important for enhancing things like neurotransmitter transmission and brain signaling. And then the other component, EPA, is really important for mitigating inflammation or keeping inflammation at bay in the brain. And the brain, as I mentioned before, is sensitive to inflammation. And that's because the brain is a very oxygen hungry organ. So just as it is hungry for energy, for glucose through the food that we're eating, it's also super oxygen hungry. And that means that it can be a little bit vulnerable to inflammation caused by oxidative stress, because oxidative stress, the biochemical process of oxidative stress needs oxygen availability for that to happen. And so EPA is really important for keeping inflammation at bay, basically. That can sometimes be caused by oxidative stress. It's also critically important, omega-3 in general, for the expression of serotonin and the sensitivity to serotonin. So those are just some of the ways that the omega-3 can influence our brain chemistry. One of the other ways is actually the production of a protein called BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor. And this is basically a type of protein that acts like a fertilizer to our brain. So it encourages the production of new brain cells, so neuroplasticity, and also paves the way for neural pathways and also brain cell regeneration. So it's an incredibly important protein, and omega-3 can help stimulate that. So if you are vegetarian, then make sure you're getting those alpha-linoleic sources of foods in your diet on a daily basis. And if you are vegetarian, then oily fish, 3 to 4 times a week, basically.
And if for people that don't eat as much fish as that per week, do you have recommendations for particular supplements that are, obviously it's not going to be as good as, but can be close to?
Yeah, so I actually just wrote an article about this yesterday because there's quite conflicting evidence in terms of supplement efficacy with omega-3. So the main issue with omega-3 supplement is that the omega-3 that you find in these supplements comes in a triglyceride form, which what happens is that when you eat it, when you ingest it, your pancreas enzymes degrades that omega-3 and makes it unavailable for your brain. Mm-hmm. So in order for it to have an impact on your brain, it needs to cross something called the blood-brain barrier, which is the semi-permeable membrane that protects your brain from things like toxins, viruses, and other types of pathogens. So it's really important that this blood-brain barrier is working properly. But the problem is that it will only accept nutrients in certain forms. Mm-hmm. And when it comes to omega-3, it will only really accept omega-3 if it's bound to a phospholipid, which is another type of fat. And that's why eating omega-3 is better, because when you're eating, for example, shellfish, you're going to find the omega-3 bound to phospholipid naturally. But when it comes to supplements, there are things like krill oil, or even herring roe oil. So that's basically herring fish eggs. That will have phospholipid bound omega-3 in it. The other option is that you can take an omega-3 supplement with a phospholipid supplement together. So that will help the absorption and help the kind of crossing into the brain through the blood-brain barrier. So it's actually these details that can really move the needle. And I think the supplement industry is such a huge industry, and it's overwhelming to choose, to know which one to choose. It's difficult to navigate. Yeah. And people can end up spending so much money on supplements, and they might just be doing absolutely nothing because they're not being absorbed or utilized properly in the body.
Yeah, it's too bad they don't automatically add that to the
and I think oil. Yeah, exactly. But I think that's also because the science is quite recent actually on that.
Mm-hmm. Maybe you can make your own line of supplements and we can just get it from you.
Maybe I do, yes.
Well, Galen has a question. I've been dealing with IBS issues for many years, and I'm different diets that haven't helped. I developed anxiety and fear around eating and don't enjoy food anymore. I've noticed the term disordered eating lately, which sounds like what I'm dealing with. Any suggestions?
Okay, it was quite a loaded question. So with IBS, there are many things that can cause IBS, and yes, there is a kind of a mental health component of IBS, because as you know, I was kind of mentioning before, there's this bidirectional communication between the brain and the gut. So the brain can influence the gut and the gut can influence the brain. And so that's why we often find things like IBS hand in hand with, things like anxiety and depression.
Yes.
So when we're tackling something like IBS, it has to be both emotional, has to be, looking at things like, therapy, like cognitive behavioral therapy, for example, but we can also help through nutrition. IBS can be caused by a wide variety of things. It can be caused by an imbalance in your gut microbiome, which can then lead to a change in your neurochemistry, essentially. So if that's what it is for you as, as an individual, then We would look at ways to recondition your gut microbiome, taking out foods that will be, letting you down, things like sugars, additives, processed foods, inflammatory seed oils like corn oil, sunflower oil, rapeseed oil, canola oil, which is what it would be called in the States, I think. And then putting in foods that are nourishing to the gut. So the foods that I mentioned before, plant foods, lots of colors, but also really healing foods like bone broth, for example, can be really healing for the gut. Can help with not only help to recondition the gut microbiome, but also help with intestinal permeability, which is often seen hand in hand with things like IBS. Now, the issue around developing anxiety and fear around eating, I completely understand that, because when you're getting triggered by different foods, and then you're experiencing not very pleasant symptoms like bloating and cramping, of course there's going to be fear developed around that. So it would be a case of really identifying what are the trigger foods for you. So perhaps you might be dealing with some kind of intolerance as well. Gluten and dairy are the most significant culprits when it comes to intolerances. So perhaps you want to think about doing an elimination diet and seeing whether removing those foods from your diet can actually help with the symptoms around IBS. If there are emotional aspects to disordered eating, then I would definitely recommend seeing a therapist, because there's that whole kind of emotional component of eating that is also so important. And I'm not trained to deal with, because I'm not a therapist, I'm a nutritionist, although I have a background in eating disorders, and it's not really my area of expertise. But where I suppose would be the most help is really kind of working out what are the underlying drivers for your IBS issues, and how can we work from the gut upwards rather than from the brain downwards, which is what a therapist would do essentially.
Yeah, kind of covering mind, body, spirit, I think is going to be so helpful. Brain training is such a great thing if you haven't seen the brain training program. I think between brain training, nutrition, and working with an HSP practitioner in this particular field, you want to work with an HSP, and you also want to work with somebody who's specifically experienced with what you are going through and want to talk about. Anastasia, tell me, in our last couple of minutes here, we want to do kind of a little quick summary and or share anything that you want to make sure that you share today, as well as how people can find you.
I guess, if you want to find out more about nutrition, the link between nutrition and mental health, the best place to start would be my website, which is wholemindhealth.co.uk. And I've got a blog on there which has some articles that you might be interested in reading. Following me on Instagram as well is a good place to start. I'm very, very focused with all of my content is very much focused on anxiety and depression, so following me on there is a good start too. But that's pretty much it, I suppose. I will be doing a masterclass soon, probably in the next few weeks, so if you sign up to my mailing list, then you'll be informed about that, and that will be more sharing of information basically.
Yeah, I've seen some of your Instagram videos. They're very good. And that's why I knew it was going to be fun to talk to you about all the brain health part of this. And one of the things I really want to make sure people who are listening understand is that what's exciting about all of this is that we do have control over our health. We even have control over what our brain is releasing into our bodies. And I want people to know that even if you've been suffering for a long time, it might not get better overnight. It might take time to heal the body, but I really want you to know, I've seen this so much with HSPs when they're using these kinds. We got such good information today about nutrition and brain health. And if you really stay consistent with this, and you're really working on your anxiety and depression, and you're getting the support that you need to reduce that and develop a well-being, you're going to see improvement. I've seen this so much in HSPs improve their health. Tremendously. I'm one of those people. I used to be sick all the time, and I caught everything, and I had a lot of things go wrong in my life. And now I'm the healthiest I've ever been because I pay attention to all of these things. So I just want you guys to know that it can get better. And Anastasia has a ton of stuff. I would definitely recommend checking out her website and following her newsletter. She's got, I think she's really so similar to me and how I view things and understanding how the brain impacts us, and that there's things that we can do. I really like that you teach that you're giving specifics about what we can do in your pillars to really improve things for us and our health.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm super passionate about the work that I do, and I really just is, you know, what you've just said, I really wholeheartedly believe that that yes, we can heal, we can recover, and yes, it is a process, but I think that through that process as well, going through that process is healing. You know, I know that, you know, in society we're very much focused on quick fixes, and we want things to happen now, you know, and fast. But going through a healing process and a recovery process is just it's so valuable to long-term health, and it's really just kind of owning that process, really, I found to be helpful.
And it's something, right? You probably see this in your own healing journey, that it isn't something that we can just do once in a while. For HSPs to be really foundationally healthy, we have to take care of ourselves on a daily basis. And nutrition is a part of that.
Absolutely. And I think I mentioned to you before in our email exchange that I really feel like HSPs and people that suffer with mental health are like the canaries in the coal mine. So, you know, when canaries were used in coal mines to detect, you know, dangerous gases like carbon monoxide, we're almost like that with modern society. So we're the first to detect when something isn't right, whether it's through our diet, you know, whether it's through how modern society is made up, you know. I think that is us pretty much.
Yeah.
And that's not necessarily a bad thing. I think it's a good thing. I just think we need to learn how to hone in on that sensitivity.
Yes, and believe in your, you know, trust your instincts, trust your intuition about your health. Make sure your practitioners understand about this trait. If you don't know, I have a letter you can download it for free to give your doctor, to give your therapist about high sensitivity, because they need to know about that. And I know a lot of HSPs experience things like they're having issues and maybe they're not feeling believed by their practitioners or something like that. It's really important that you're surrounding yourself by people who believe in you, and that you believe in you, and that you trust yourself. And there's so much research that shows that we have extra gifts. We do have the ability to know earlier when something isn't right. And that's going to really help in our well-being approach, because we'll know, like, when I ate this, this happened. Okay, maybe I need to not do that next time, or I'll shift it a little bit. So really trust that within your own process. Becca says, go slow with changes. It's a journey that takes practice and patience with yourself. Very good. I definitely. Absolutely. Larissa says, I love your name, Anastasia. Thank you. You're a beautiful spirit. I agree. Christy says, very informative. Thank you. I agree, Anastasia. You are a beautiful spirit, and you are such a great example of sensitive empowerment. And I love highlighting you because you're somebody that's been through it. You went through your own illness and your own challenges, both physically and mental health wise. And now you're using your gifts. And many of them, I'm sure, are your sensitivity gifts to be able to support people now. So definitely check out her website. Why don't you say it one more time?
It's wholemindhealth.co.uk.
Okay, good. And I will put that into the show notes too, so it'll be clickable. And for those that want to learn more about this trait of sensitivity, you can visit my website at juliebielen.com or sensitiveconnection.com. Thank you, everybody, for being with us. Anastasia, I'm so happy to get this out into the world and to share you and all the really helpful resources that you gave us today. We really appreciate your knowledge and wisdom. And it was really nice to spend time with you and get to meet you. And let's stay in touch. I'm glad you're in the community. So when I post this too, if people have questions or comments for you afterwards, then you'll be able to see them right in the community too. So thanks, everybody. Thank you, Anastasia.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Take good care of your health out there, guys. And we're with you on this journey. We'll take it one step at a time. Such valuable information today. And thank you, everybody, for being here. Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.